Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1919, Fun Friday. And welcome to November. It's November the 1st, 2024. Where the heck is the year gone? I have no idea. All I know is that it's going to be a fun few months. That's all I know. And I'm predicting a lot of fun over the next few months, which is great because we're talking about Fun Friday. So what can we talk about on Fun Friday? Well, let's have a talk about our ancestors and what they did for fun. Everybody grew up in different times. There were different things going on, different events happening. There was different ways of communication. But there was also things that they didn't have that we have today, but they were able to use them but they were able to find ways to entertain themselves or have parties and social events and things like that. So how can we find out more about these things? Well, number one on the list is explore old photographs. Photos often capture hobbies and leisure activities, looking for images of ancestors with musical instruments and sport attire at social gatherings. And there were times when, not everybody had a camera. So the camera you've got is from when cameras were available for individual people, but then there's also events that people were at where they had a photographer come in and do the photograph, and everybody had to stop, hold it, wait, and then they will let go. There could also be artwork about the entertainment that they had. There's another one. It's a hobby. What hobbies did they have? Maybe they were artists. I always remember in from the story Pride and Prejudice. Now, yes, it is a novel, but it also gives you, so that's what I like about novels that are done in time and period pieces, is it gives you a glimpse into some of the activities or the entertainment that they used to have. And in Pride and Prejudice, they always talked about a woman of accomplishment. And that meant that they could do a wide variety of things like draw, sewing, cross-stitching, embroidery, playing musical instruments, singing, reading poetry. There was they were able to read. It was a whole gamut of things that they could do to keep themselves occupied during their days and things. So they used to do that for entertainment. They had the balls that would go on. These balls would go all night. They would start like early evening and go all the way through. There'd be dinner served at some point during the thing. There'd be dancing. And these dances were not just a short piece. The musical pieces for the dancers would go on for several minutes. They were several minutes long. Not like the ones that we have today where they put a song on and I don't know what average length. I know when I was growing up, an average length of the song was like about 2.5 to 3 minutes. They're a little longer now, but we're talking about at least a 30-minute dance that some of them used to do. So you're on your feet talking with this partner that you have, that has this dance partner for 30 minutes. They had little dance cards that they would, the woman would carry, and the men would come and pencil their names in when they wanted to have a dance with this particular woman. And it was a very social event. And not only that, it was also when you got to a certain age, you had a coming out. And when you came out, it meant that you were available for marriage. So were any of and this was a lot in society, in high society, that they used to do this. The working class people, they had things where the kids would invent games. They had toys that they could play with. If they didn't have toys, they would make their own toys. They had all sorts of things that they could do together. They would tell stories. That's where some of your storytellers come from. And there was a lot of other activities that they were doing, running and playing with a ball and a stone and a stick. The boys would be running around hitting a stone and a stick around and sort of like following it down the thing. They would play chase and tag and a lot of other games that they were able to play as well. How do we know this? Because of history books, things that are in history, pictures that have been captured, artwork that has been captured of time in history. There's also checking your local newspaper archives. They frequently covered community events, fairs, dances, personal milestones. They might even turn around and say, that Mr. and Mrs. Smith were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. And they had a party that was thrown for them by their children, and this is who came and visited them, and this is who was at the party. And it would also give insights into popular pastimes. The theater was a popular thing to go to as well. And this was live theater. Movies didn't come until, the early 1900s. Actually, no, I think it was the 1800s where they had the silent movies, and they would actually have a live pianist playing, or they may have an orchestra there playing, giving you building up the drama and all of that with the music. Review family letters and diaries. This is a goldmine, because not only are you understanding daily life and the leisure activities that were going on, but it also mentioned if they had a favorite game or a hobby, or they went to a party, they had a favorite gathering, maybe it was somebody's birthday or wedding anniversary, maybe they went to a wedding, maybe they went to a baptism. All sorts of things will be written into these family letters and diaries. And I don't have it in here with me. I actually have, there was a book that what was she? She was a half great aunt. And how was she a half? It's because she was my second great grandfather's daughter from his first marriage. His first wife died and left him with a parcel of kids. Then he got married again, and the only child he had then was my great grandfather, and my second great grandfather passed away when my great grandfather was about 5. But Patsy had lived in the manor house in England for a while, and so she wrote letters about her dad and sent them. I don't remember who she sent them to, but they got a collection of the letters that she had written about her life in the manor house and War Boys, and published a book about it. And my dad's aunt, so my great aunt, had a copy of this book, and she actually loaned it to my mother one time, and my mother went in and made photocopies, the different members in the family, and I happened to get a copy of that. And my mum put it into one of those archival safe books that just have the plastic sleeves you can slide stuff in, and so she put that in there. Then at the back of the book, one of the times when they were in England, they actually went and visited the manor house and got to talk with the guy who currently owned the place at the time. I don't know if he still does, but he had restored the manor house back to what it was like. Of course, keeping modern conveniences like plumbing to what it was like when my family lived and my ancestors lived there. And he took them on a tour through the house, and he gave them a brochure that he had written up. It was actually several bits of paper where he had written up about the life of the manor house, like when it was built, who had owned it over the years. So I could see when my ancestors lived there. And there was even photographs of what the house was like before he took it over and after he had taken it, and the restoration that he had done to it. So it was a very interesting thing. And then my parents and then my mum added into the back pictures that they had taken themselves, not only of the outside, or mainly the outside of the manor house, but also of the graveyard. And the manor house sat behind the church, and in the church was the graveyard for the church, and that's where some of my ancestors were buried. So they went and took photographs of the tombstones and the headstones that were there, so that they could, so we would have them recorded that this is what was written on them, so we could help trace some family. So having stuff like that, I mean, it's fascinating reading through there and seeing what some of their pastimes were. So you could, reviewing diaries. So that's a way of having a diary, is if somebody's published the family letters or something, or somebody has the letters, have them publish it as a book about the life of this particular person, and just make it available to family members. Great Christmas. We've got the holidays coming up, gift giving time. So if you happen to have a stack of old letters that were written backwards and forwards between people, and you want the rest of the family to maybe read these, have been asking to read them, why not do something like having them published as a book and just making enough copies for family members and giving them to the families for Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever gift-giving celebration you have at the end of the year. You could also search occupational records for social clubs. Some occupations had related social groups, fraternal organizations, such as Freemasons, trade unions, where people would socialize outside of work. So maybe there could be some records there of events that they held and may have a list of who attended those events. So that's another way that you can have a look, or maybe what the event was. Investigate community and church records. Churches and local groups often organize social events like picnics, dances, choir gatherings, which could reveal social pastimes. They used to have the people that would go wandering around the streets and singing songs and all of that. Maybe you had an ancestor that was part of a choral, and that's what they did. Look for sports team rosters and event programs. Ancestors might have participated in local sports leagues, school teams, or community performances, which can sometimes be found in yearbooks or archived programs. So if they're in the age where yearbooks were part of the school go have a look at the old yearbooks and see, what were they in? Were they in drama? Were they in any sports teams? Were they on the debate team? Were they part of the choir? Were they part of the orchestra, part of the marching band, part of the cheerleading squad? All sorts of things can be found in yearbooks. And research popular entertainment of the era. So understanding common pastimes of their times, like theatre, vaudeville, radio shows, can offer context if specific family records aren't available. So if you can't find out what your family was involved in, what was available at that time, I don't know if it's still available, but I do have copies of, there were these books that were designed for writers who were writing writing in a historical period, and it will turn around and says, what was it? The Author's Guide to the Victorian Era. And like it would have in there what the fashions were like, what the during the Victorian era, what were the fashion, what the years covered, what were the fashions like, what were some of the news highlights during that time, some of the major events during that time, what were some of the pastimes that were available. Like you would have the social season where people would go into London, and this is part of the coming out for some of the young ladies, where the young ladies were basically put on display for marriage, and they would be seen walking around or riding in carriages around through the main parks and things. And the gentlemen would either be walking around in groups or riding horseback and able to go up and talk with the young ladies and things like that. So basically when they had their coming out, they were basically put on the market for marriage. That's basically how it was. And that's in the higher society areas. So, you've got these programs like, was it like Pride and Prejudice, Bridgerton, things like that. They give you a glimpse into certain areas of what life was like during that time. If you want to learn more, go look up your history books and see what the time period was like. What was it involved with? There's also things that you can do like, reading history books. What was the period like during that time? What were some of the pastimes for those that were back of the house? Like your waiter, your butlers, your scullery maids, your cooks, your I'm just trying to think, the housemaids and all of that. What was their life like? Yes, they had to deal with the main house, but in their off time, what sort of things were they able to do? And there were times when there were people that would, they'd have a party, they'd be having a ball at their house, but they would, these big elaborate mansions and things, and they would have people come in and stay in their house, their mansion. And they would have it would be a whole weekend that the event would go for. Yes, they'd have the ball, the grand ball partway through it, but there'd also be other events going on, like, some of them may get together and put a play on for everybody else out in the backyard, out in the grounds somewhere. They may go horseback riding. They may be playing different sports, tennis or a version thereof. How did some of the sports come about? What was, look at the history of sports. Were your ancestors around when those sports were invented, or were they before that period or after that period when those sports were invented? Some of them have very interesting beginnings and come from very interesting places and times and how they figured it all out and everything else. So looking at, where was that little flash of light that just went there? I've got a moth in here somewhere. Oh, probably the angels visiting. So going and researching the history of a time period where your ancestors lived, and if you know sort of what their dwellings were like or how they lived at the time, research that class that they were part of. Research that class that they were part of to see to give you some insight into what their life was like. What were some of the pastime things that they had at that time? I don't even know when playing cards came around. I don't even know the history of playing cards, but where did board games come from? Where did different card games come from? When were they invented? I know back in the 1700s they were playing whist. I think it was 1800s, 1700s. I'm trying to remember when Jane Austen was alive. It might have been 1800s. But they would play whist, which was a card game. Where did the cards come from? When did they start using them? Look at the history of this. Have you ever looked up the history of a sandwich? Two pieces of bread with something in between, and you put them together and you make a sandwich. Have you ever heard the story of that? It came about from Lord Sandwich. The story goes, I don't know how much truth is to this. I haven't researched it to see, but the story that we were always told when we were growing up was that he was playing cards one night, and probably gambling, I don't know, gentleman club, whatever. And he was hungry and wanted some food. And out of desperation for waiting for food or something, he says, just take some cold meat, take 2 pieces of bread, cold meat, and put it together and bring that here. Because he didn't want to leave the table to go eat. Because in those days, they didn't have sandwiches. They would bring out the spread, and you'd have to go and sit down and eat. And because you couldn't juggle a plate with a knife and a fork in your hands, and so you'd have to actually leave the table to go sit down to eat. And he just didn't want to leave the table, so he told them to put some cold meat between 2 slices of bread. That was it. That was the story I heard. I have never researched it to see how true that actually was. Maybe I'll actually I'll add that to my list to research. But that's the story that I heard growing up about how Lord Sandwich invented the sandwich and how it came about. So go find some goofy thing like, where did playing cards come from? When were they invented? How long have they been around? You've got the game Mahjong. Where did that start? That's been around for centuries, that game. So when was that invented? There's all these different games that came along over time. And it's like, go and investigate the history of games. If you're playing a board game or something, go and investigate, when was Monopoly first came out? When was the first deck of cards ever made? Who decided to make them in 4 different suits and name them those things and give 13 cards per 13 cards? Yeah, 13 cards per I had to stop and think. And there's Wild Joker guy in there as well, throwing the Joker in there as well. What is the history of these cards? Now, some of these you can actually find in books that tell you how to play certain card games. I have a book somewhere around, and it's just full. It's about this thick, and it's about this size, and it's just full of card games after card games. You got single players, you got multiplayers, you got singles, 2 people, and multiplayer card games in there. And it can tell you if you're playing a particular card game, can it be played? And it's 4 people. Can you play it with 2 people? How do you play it with 2 people? And some of those have like the history of that card game, like how long it's been around. I know Whist has been around for a very, very long time. But go and have a look at this. How did basketball get started? Bouncing a ball and putting it in a hoop and running up and down a court. How did these games get started? Where did they come from? American football, gridiron, where did that come from? In New Zealand, we've got rugby and cricket, and how did they all get started? There's all these things that, all these pastimes that we have. Where do they get tennis? How long has that been around? That's been around for a long time. And I used to have what's called, and in England, they also play King's tennis, which is something about, I'm trying to remember what the court looks like. You've got the court, but everybody's closed in around the court, and there's like these overhangs, and you can actually bounce the ball up off the overhang down onto the other side of the court. I think it was like an earlier idea of squash, where squash came from. I don't know. But to me, that kind of made sense when I kind of thought about it a little bit. But of course, I haven't gone and looked it up. But there used to be the King's tennis before it became tennis that we know today. It was played very differently, but kind of the same, but very different, a very different court setup. And it's very different to the tennis that we know today. Look at also too, when you're doing all that, look at the fashions. Women were not allowed to go swimming. They didn't have bathing suits that they could go swimming in until later on, and then it like covered them from head to toe anyway. So look at the different fashions that have been around too, and what they used to go swimming in, and how did they come up with the idea of having swimming pools and doing races, and where did all this stuff come from that we now use today for fun? But think about things that do not require technology. So anything games that you play on the internet and stuff like that, some of the games we play on the internet actually originated as a physical game, a board game or a card game. And that now you just play it virtually instead of playing it there. Like I love doing crosswords, and I love doing cryptic crosswords. And there's a woman in Australia called Christina Lovett, and she does these amazing cryptic crossword books. And whenever I go back to New Zealand, I buy a batch of them to bring back with me. Because that's my favorite pastime. Could I do them online? Absolutely, but there's no fun in that. I mean, I write all over them, because when you're doing cryptic, you get given this cryptic clue, and it's not a straight clue. It is not, a drinking vessel. And you think, oh, mug, bottle, cup, glass, how many letters, what's going to fit in that gap? Electronic, and then you're like writing down different options that could be there, but it could be a cryptic. It's not a drinking vessel. It'll have it written in a different way. that leads you to the same answer as the straight. So and on some of them, she'll put the straight clues and she'll put the cryptic clues. So if you get stuck, you go have a look at the straight clue. And if you can figure out the straight clue, then you go back and look at the cryptic clue and go, now, how did they get that? How do you get that answer out of that? I love cryptic crosswords, especially her ones, because I understand them. The other ones, yeah. But, where did they all come from? Where did the idea of crosswords come from? Where did the idea of noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe come from? Go look up in history. Maybe your ancestors were around at that time when they were invented, or in the place that they were invented. Maybe they invented that game and you don't know it. Oh, that would be a good challenge. What did your ancestors invent that you don't know about? Anyway, with that, I'm out of here. I am not starting James Bond tonight. I know I was supposed to be starting James Bond tonight, but I still have to finish this before 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow morning for my book club. And I really want to go read this rather than watch a James Bond movie right now, because I need to get it finished for tomorrow, but two, it's getting pretty good in there. And yes, there's some interesting stuff that's just starting to happen. And I'm sort of like, where's it going to go? I've been listening and reading to this at the same time, but there's been times when I've been sitting down and like I'll have the book in front of me and I have got the audio going at the same time. And then there's times where I just go and read the book as the book. And there's times when I'm doing stuff that I'll have my audio book going at the time, and I'm listening to it as I'm cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, whatever. But then I've got to go and figure out where in the book am I up to. And if I've been reading it, I've got to make sure that I go to the end. And these are long chapters in these. I've got to go to the end of a chapter so I can easily find the place in the audio. So, yes, it's been a very good backwards combination. Sometimes I'm listening, sometimes I'm reading, sometimes I'm doing both together. Anyway, with that, I am out of here. If you still want to go and join us with the Stillhouse Lake tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, go to Eventbrite, look up Love to Read book club discussion. You can even type in there Stillhouse Lake and it should come up there on Eventbrite as well. You can go scan the QR code up here to get the audio, the digital or the physical copy of the book. We're meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning on Zoom. When you register with Eventbrite, they will send you the link to come and join us at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So with that, and we're going to be announcing the next book, and the next book looks really good. It's one that this is one I hadn't read before. The Housemaid, when we did that, I hadn't read that one before. When we did The Traveler, that one is one that I'd read before. But the next one is another new one that I have not read before. But it's based on it's a fictional story, but it's based on true events. So that's going to be very interesting to dive into. So I'm looking forward to that one. But anyway, and that's getting announced tomorrow morning at our book club reading. And if you're not at the book club discussion, then you'll be finding out about it tomorrow evening on our podcast. So with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening.